what you're connecting with is not just a compound in a plant, it's an intelligence, it's a spirit. The spirit of mushrooms, the spirit of ayahuasca, the spirit of San Pedro. These are all very different frequencies and different intelligences that are there to help and guide us. And the substance is more of a permission slip to experience the intelligence so that it makes sense in the 3D story. Because if we could just click our fingers and experience it, that would be pretty intense and terrifying for many people. So it's like we have this story of like, take this mushroom and you will start to experience this thing. But I see it as a permission slip. It's a conduit to then open up to this intelligence. So you're interacting with this intelligence, and it has also decisions that it can make of how much to teach you, how much to show you, how gentle to be with you in the trip, or how intense to be in the trip. And that's why I said the intention matters so much, because it's really your only way of communicating with this intelligence and saying, hey, I'm here to learn. This is what I would like. I'm open to something else as well, because that's the surrender piece. But here is what I ideally would like to receive from this. And then that intelligence can dance with you and can treat you like a partner rather than something that you're using it for experience. Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to the James Xander Trip podcast, where we dive into psychedelics, spirituality, mindset, and how we can connect deeper with our heart and our soul. I have a special episode for you today. I was recently invited on the University of Life podcast from Jamie White, and we had an epic conversation about life, the universe, psychedelics, and how I was led to mushrooms and the work I'm doing today. So enjoy this episode with me and Jamie White.
I'm here in Bali at the moment, and I was slowly but surely meeting these really interesting independent entrepreneurial types. That's something I love doing, just making kind of an honest effort every week to meet somebody new. And anyway, I came across a couple of really interesting entrepreneurs who all suggested I meet this man, James. And I was like, that's interesting when 3 or 4 people introduce the same person. And they said, do you know what? He runs this really interesting community. I was like, ooh, tell me more. And he's like, well, it's a meetup for entrepreneurs. But it's for entrepreneurs that credit some of their edge and their expertise to their use of psychedelics. And my eyes lit up. Is that fair to say, James?
That's a great description of it.
Lovely. So I feel like I'm almost coming out of the closet a little bit in sharing this interview, because for me, that's I would say psychedelics have given me an edge, and taken me deeper into myself and truer as well in terms of how I live. But it's a hard conversation to have, because there's so many opinions about psychedelics, and so many people would see them as escapist. So in chatting with you, I'm like, yeah, I'm excited to kind of explore this whole space. Would you have kind of thought similarly as well in terms of like the divisive perspective with regards to psychedelics?
I don't experience it anymore. And I think it's because I'm embodied in what I do. I'm embodied in my feelings about them. You know, when you first start doing something and you share it with the world, you get criticism because you're not fully embodied in it yet. But if, let's say, you've been doing something for 10 years, someone comes up to you and they have a problem with how you're doing something, it just bounces off of you because they have no idea on the journey you went on for 10 years. So I see this as the same way, that maybe someone who is fresh to psychedelics, they're sort of afraid of what their friends might think, or what their parents might think, or what their family might think. But when you live it and you breathe it and you understand deep down how important these tools are for your own consciousness, for your own personal growth, then someone's criticism almost feels a little bit amusing. You know, like if someone comes up to you and says, oh, these things, they scramble your brain. Have you taken them? No, but I've heard this on CNBC, it's like.
That's a really interesting one, because there is so much perspective on psychedelics from so many that haven't taken them, are afraid to take them, and have read so much fear-inducing stuff about them.
Mm-hmm.
But I have never had an experience that I could say was in any way negative that didn't serve me. And I think
it's a good caveat.
Yeah, I would own exactly what you just shared there. That like the most critique I've got is from people with no experience whatsoever, and I find that funny. And I actually think what you shared is actually really, really true in life as a whole. That like for things that we haven't fully owned, we get a lot of critique, and we actually we let that in and we let it rattle us a little bit. But when we own something, when we've kind of committed to it, and we're like, look, this is me. This is what I do. This is what I'm interested in. When somebody says anything to the negative, you don't really feel it anymore. You just kind of recognize you have your tribe, and then others, no. And that's fine. Fair?
Absolutely. And if I can add a fun little tangent here. So I recently released this guided meditation, and it's all about the wealth frequency and upgrading your wealth frequency. And I send it out to my newsletter. And within the span of like a couple minutes, I get 2 different responses, 2 different emails from one person. James, this is like the most disgusting email I've received. Like, you should take a look at your ego and your greed. This is someone who has not bought the meditation, has no idea what the audio is about. They've just read the promotional, marketing message. Second email from someone who bought it. Gosh, this is amazing. Is there more where this is coming from? And it's like the polarity and the fact that these 2 feedbacks came within like a couple minutes. Yeah. It was fascinating to see.
Hammering that point in again, I think the most opinion comes from those with the littlest experience. And it's actually quite true of life. What's that quote around like, the more you know, the more you realize there is to know. And so the less opinionated you are, the less...
I think it was Mark Twain, the more you know that how much you don't know.
Yeah.
How much bigger the circle of the unfamiliar on the edge becomes bigger as your knowledge grows.
And so the more understanding of difference you have.
Absolutely.
Whereas the less you know, the more you actually think you know. And the more opinionated you are. And so it's actually almost quite a quick little like summary of like, yeah, those that are opinionated, those that are really, really projecting their ideas on others, generally speaking, aren't, I suppose haven't been exposed to so much. Like when I reflect on my own personal journey, and actually, yeah, if I take that back personally, what I find is that if I reflect back on a couple of years ago when I was most opinionated, I can really recognize right now that was when I was most naive. And so many of the ideas that I thought were like, these are fundamental ideas, I've actually recognized they're like, no, they're most of the kind of the thoughts and the beliefs that I had are actually completely wrong.
Mm-hmm. Do you notice as you get more wiser and older and more mature, you become more nuanced about your opinions? You stop saying these ultimatums of black and white, and you kind of pause for a bit and you're like, actually, I don't know about this, or there could be more layers to this than I initially thought.
Do you know, I there's a kind of a couple of words that come at the end of my sentences now. I'm like, I'm this for now. We'll see what the case is in a couple of months' time.
I love that.
Whereas like, yeah, I was very full of these big pillar-like statements of like, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I do a few years ago. And I'm trying to hold back giggles at myself because the fact is we're fluid, evolving beings, which is a kind of an interesting one when you think of society now. It's all about people defining themselves, what gender they are, what sexuality they are, and all sorts. And again, I would think that these aren't static things. If we are really pushing ourselves into life and leaning into our edges, those definitions evolve likewise. And so we should actually be, I suppose, rather than finding like comfort and support in aligning with certain beliefs and ideas, we should actually start trying to just build that from within and build that from a place that doesn't almost imprison us in an ideology, but instead actually liberates us from it and allows us to be experiences the world in all its different forms.
Mm-hmm. I love this. I'm this for now. It reminds me of what Steve Pavlina once said. He said, who I am right now does not have to correspond to who I was 5 minutes ago, or does not have to match the expectations of me 5 minutes ago. I'm paraphrasing it, but it was such a great reminder of how much the past holds us to the image that we're supposed to be of how we were. And I've noticed in my life, the biggest growth I've had in my life, or the biggest moments of revelation, came when I broke away from my so-called past authentic self and moved into a new version of me. And then that became the new authentic self.
Well, can we explore your journey? Because I am fascinated with, I'm fascinated with people's lives, people's life experiences that bring them to where they are right now. Mm-hmm. And so like for you right now, bringing together a community of entrepreneurs, helping them really open up and share their experiences, not just in business and not just with all the kind of challenges that come with that, but also into their more magical world of like journeying into psychedelics and taking knowledge and wisdom from that and applying that to their lives. Like that's like for a lot of people really edgy territory. For me, something that I have held dear, but also held quite sacred. So like when I came across you, I was like, oh, wow, that like, I actually have my own community of entrepreneurs. We all do this quite privately, but then I was like, ooh, you're doing this publicly. That's amazing. So I'm really curious, how did you end up doing what you're doing now? Like if you were kind of thinking of like the journey to where you are right now, what does that look like?
Like a roller coaster. There's been so many moments that have led me to where I am now, but I would say truly discovering psychedelics was a huge piece of it.
Okay, so that sets me up perfectly for the give me the James before and the James almost immediately after.
So the James immediately after experiencing, let me tell the story of my first psychedelic experience, because I think that'll paint a great picture. And even before that, the story of the first shift of consciousness I experienced was through a weed edible that my friend introduced me to. And so that's not even a psychedelic, but my friend, Sky, he comes over one day, he brings in this tiny weed edible, and he knew I was curious to explore these realms, but I was super nervous. I had no idea what I was doing. And he's like, this will open the gates a little bit for you. And what this THC edible did was I could sense I was James, but more. It was like in 20 minutes while it kicked in, reality shifted. And it was still the same reality, still Vancouver. We were walking down a little path in a park, but it was different. And then a month later, another friend, we went camping and he brought some LSD. And that was my first proper psychedelic experience. And again, the same experience, but even more amplified, where same reality, I'm still me. I'm not seeing any dragons or anything crazy that you might see in a cartoon about psychedelics. But there's so many layers. I'm seeing frequency. I'm seeing the layers of my ego being deconstructed while I look in the reflection of a puddle. There's just more. And that experience of more, which I always intuitively felt was there. Like since I was a kid, I'm like, there has to be more to this reality. There has to be more than just rocks and trees and skyscrapers. But I had no proof of it. It's like I felt the magic permeating through this reality, through this hologram, but I had no proof of it. And I'm like, I got to see a UFO, or I want an out-of-body experience. I want some proof. And the proof came to me years and years later in the form of psychedelics.
Okay, let me just take you back to I'm looking at a puddle and seeing the layers of my ego almost like wash away. What does that actually look like? I'm kind of thinking like if I looked in a puddle and if I was experiencing that, it's like I used to be a nightclub promoter and thought I was super cool. And it's like, I see that. And then I see actually how silly I was. And then I see, me and some of my like beliefs in terms of this is how you should look after yourself. And this is how you're healthy. And I was like, I see the bullshit in that. And as I'm looking deeper, I actually just recognize like me as almost a kid. And I see me as like me and my innocence and me and my silliness. Is that kind of what that is?
Okay. It's exactly that. I was looking, so we were camping in the woods. It was the perfect place to do LSD. Perfect place for the first time. I was so blessed. It was raining slightly, like the tiniest bit, so everything was moody, and there was these puddles, and I looked at the puddle, and what I saw my reflection, but on the LSD, I could just see that the masks I was wearing on top of me for protection or for defense or for feeling safe, I could see that very clearly they were masks.
Okay, I get that completely. I recognize the person I show up with in front of some friends because I just don't want to go through the personality bashing or the slagging or stuff. And I recognize the person I show up with sometimes with certain family members because I just don't want to get into drama. Yeah. And so I put up these layers or these barriers sometimes just for safety and protection. But in actual fact, they might serve in those moments, but unfortunately they don't allow a deeper level of connection. They block off a level of understanding. And they actually, I think, really knock my confidence as well. Because if I'm practicing being somebody else or putting up this shield the whole time, it's holding me back from being my true self. And it's holding me back from allowing the world to recognize me in my true self as well, right?
Exactly. Well, this is why we admire the great artists or the pop stars or the great actors of the world, is because in their starness, they're able to fully be themselves and be seen by millions of people and not have that move them from their center.
Yeah.
Whereas most people, when they get up to perform or they're on stage or they have a mic in front of them, they're not able to hold that center. They start thinking of what someone else is judging them or seeing them as, and they start conforming their way to how they want to be perceived rather than just being them.
Yeah.
And if I could summarize my whole journey of psychedelics from 2018 until now, it's been this journey of unlayering, removing these layers bit by bit to get more of the truth of myself and to allow others to see more of that truth.
Okay. So when I went for like give me the before and the after, essentially what I'm hearing is like, look, I was kind of like so many kind of people find themselves in just a big load of bullshit, basically. And the past and the future from that leading you to the present has just you been really figuring out your true self and being that true self and coming to that point layer by layer. I always think there's all these lovely lines I think that start to flow through me, but I really think like what life is all about is finding yourself, being yourself. And that's one of those lines that you hear it and it's like, what does that mean? But the more I come to live, the more I actually really believe like to find yourself is quite a journey. It takes a lot of experience to figure out what you like and what you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And then to be who you are. That is so much. Yeah. Like there's so many of us. And if I make this personal, like there has been so much in me in the past that like so many desires, so many ideas that I have or wants in terms of how to live that I just was like, oh no, God, no. I couldn't bring that into the world. I'd be afraid what people would say. I would be afraid of what would come from that. And I buried them. But little by little, as I've I suppose progressed, I've just built confidence to bring that to the surface, to bring that into my world. And it is disruptive. I've said goodbye to lots of friends. I've had lots of awkward conversations with family, friends, and all of that. But I've felt much greater ease.
The disruption sets you free.
Yeah, the disruption sets you free.
It has to happen because of I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but of the lies that we've told about who we are in a way, or the image we've presented. And when the truth comes out of actually, this is also a part of me, the disruption happens, and it's a beautiful disruption to open the way for more of that truth to come through. And the right people fall away and the right people come into your reality to support that.
There's a mind-body medicine specialist who gave a line that has stuck with me since on this podcast. And it's, if you keep the peace on the outside, you start a war on the inside.
Oh, yes.
But if you're happy to start wars on the outside, you foster peace on the inside. Beautiful. Really, really beautiful.
I love that.
So I suppose now I'm kind of fast forwarding you, and apologies, but I'm really curious of like when you're sitting in your circles of entrepreneurial types and they're saying, yeah, psychedelics are incredible for me in terms of bringing an edge and a complement to not just how I show up personally, but how I do business as well. Like, what does that actually look like? Because there's so much, I have come in contact with so much fear and so much scrutiny and so much anxiety around psychedelics, and people would say all the more when it comes to their careers. And here's a belief that turns it on its head, that it's like, no, it actually could be the missing element that could help you get to the next level.
So I see it in two ways in most of the people that I'm around. They either do these deep trips that unlayer more of the truth, that allows them to make better decisions in business, better decisions in relationships, more aligned decisions in life, and or they microdose. So they take these tiny, tiny doses of psilocybin, and it just gives them that bit of an edge, more creativity, more flow, more access to intuition.
Yeah.
So one of those two, or they combine them. For me personally, I have been exploring microdosing a bit more these days, but in general, I love going deep.
Yeah.
I love doing one deep trip a month and just going way, way, way deep into my soul, getting all the homework downloads that I need, and then spending the rest of the month integrating those lessons.
Yeah. So my first experience of doing psychedelics, I was blessed. I had this group of entrepreneurial friends who were all very inspired from hearing rumors of this taking place with some of the top CEOs in San Fran. I remember we were like, what are they doing? We were all into biohacking at the time. And this was like the edgy step forward for us. It was like, you know, they're all doing all these biohacks, but they're also talking about this. So we talked about it for months because we were nervous and we were anxious, but we were like, we'll all do it together. 4 of us, all kind of in business for ourselves. And we found this beautiful space. We all were so conscious of how to curate the space. We were like, let's make it really color neutral. Let's take down any artwork that might be distractive. So it's a really beautiful, neutral environment. Let's light candles. We curated a playlist. We got eye masks, and we did exactly this as well. We didn't microdose. We took quite a big dose. And the idea was that we were just curious. So let's see what happened. And for me, in reflection, it was probably one of the most beautiful experiences of my life to be like there with 4 friends adventuring. But like one of us led us through a little breathwork exercise to kind of calm us all together. Another kind of talked about intentions and like opened the forum for us to discuss fears and also kind of like ideas of what it might be. When none of us really knew what it was going to be, but it was so nice. And anyway, then at a certain point, one of my friends was almost like a bloody chemist. He had grown mushrooms and then made them into these beautiful chocolate truffles. And so anyway, we took them, put our eye masks on and laid down. And for me, what just blew my mind was it was like when you close your eyes and you don't really see much, but it was like kind of almost tuning in a TV, that suddenly that space that is normally just looks like static started to almost tune in.
That's it exactly.
And I was remembering my dreams, and I was like, this is amazing. That was the dream I had the night before, and that was the dream I had before, and I could see my dreams really clearly, and I was like, oh, there's a message here. How have I not understood that? And then suddenly I could remember memories, but not just like, you know, how we kind of have a blurry memory. It was like I was literally taking a videotape in and putting it, and I could rewind it. I could bring myself right into the room. I could look around in that room. I could remember like the smell in the air, the touch, if perhaps I was touching somebody or something like that. Like it was so precise. And that shook me. I was like, wow, I have access to my dreams. I have access to my memory at a capacity I just didn't know was there. And then the strangest thing happened. it's like I was on a swivel chair and I swiveled around and I was at a board table with like all these people, which for now I would see as my guides.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Are my ancestors. And they were like, there's a wanted me to put on the Jamie voice, but no, it was like, Jamie, you are way too distracted with your outside world. And you have no idea the power and capacity that you have in here in your internal world. So can we encourage you to stop being so concerned of what the outside world thinks and wants of you, and to journey deeper into yourself? Because we promise you that if you go deeper into yourself and start honoring yourself, you're going to live on a whole different level. And you talked about a mission, and it kind of inspired this thought. It was like, so we want you to do this, and this. And it wasn't like that was a third party. It genuinely felt like it was an internal part of me saying, this is what we need to do.
Right.
So you have been doing what you think you need to do based on what everybody else is saying out there. Here's what we should be doing from a really deep internal place, right?
Yes.
And I left. And at that moment, it was like, you've got your message. Now just enjoy the joy of your imagination and the pleasure that your body can experience. And it was amazing. I was taking on this unbelievable, imaginative, like a symphony of just like, oh my God, this is so creative. This is so beautiful. This is so entertaining, let's say. Whilst at the same time, my body was experiencing what I could only describe as full body orgasms. I was like, this is amazing. And when I came out of it, I was like, I have the capacity to remember my dreams, go back through my memories like a vault, tune into a part of myself that is like filter free and uninfluenced by external perspective. It's like my truest voice. I can experience pleasure at a level I just never knew. And oh my God, my imagination is better than any movie, any TV show. Mm-hmm. And it shook me. It shook me for weeks, actually, because I was like, I didn't know any of this was in there. This is amazing. And and so began my mission.
Oh, wow.
Now I'm kind of looking at you. I'm like, am I crazy?
I love this. No, I'm loving this share. It goes to what one of my favorite authors talks about, Neville Goddard. His whole body of work is about the imagination. And Neville believes that the imagination is the true reality. And this reality is a shadow world filtering from the imagination. So everything you're experiencing in this 3D world first happened in the 4D, which he equates to imagination.
Okay.
And so when we go into these realms, these mystical realms, and we're able to go to these memories and perceive everything exactly as it was, because it never disappeared. It's every timeline that's ever existed and will exist already is created in this 4D realm. And we're just tuning into the frequency of which timeline we're on.
Okay, I'm now at the point where I want to ask two questions. The first is like, that was my experience. And like, you've got an online curated playlist to complement psychedelics. You've got an online checklist in terms of like, here are the things to do to bring about the best journey. And like, I just did what I knew at the time.
You did beautifully.
Oof. Okay, thank you. Well, my first question is, I really want to ask you, could you tell me more about, if somebody says listening on, and if somebody is curious, it's like, okay, well, caution, and here are the things one should be conscious of if they want to get the most out of the journey.
100%. So if it's someone's first time, I do recommend a lower dose than usual, because you want to get acquainted with the plant medicine, almost like going on a first date. You're just meeting up for a coffee, you're not going full on deep yet. That would be my recommendation, is be careful with the dosage if you're not experienced. The environment is key, of course. So you have to make sure you're tripping in the most safe, comfortable environment. For most people, that would be their home. An environment where there's no unintended factors or unreliable variables coming into play. So even though tripping outside can be amazing, if you're in a park and there's a ton of people around, that's not so amazing. So I would recommend everyone trip at home in a safe location where you're comfortable. Intention is the most key thing, I think. Looking at your experience, you had the intention, I think, with your group of friends to learn something from it, to grow from it. You didn't just go into it to see funny colors. You went into it with the intention to learn more about yourself. So holding that intention firmly in mind and understanding that I'm doing this as a student and I'm coming into this experience with respect and with humbleness will go a long way in the trip, because you will be humbled if you don't go into it with respect. So intention, surrender, right? So bad trips, the way I describe why bad trips happen is purely and almost entirely because of resistance. If someone is resisting what they're feeling on the inside or resisting something external, rather than flowing with it, seeing how it might be a gift to them in the trip, seeing how they might surf the waves of energy. If you can surrender to the experience and trust that the mushrooms will guide you and lead you on a journey, you will have a very smooth trip. But if you try to control too much, resist the feelings, that's where the rough trips come in.
Yeah.
So that would be the core essentials. There's a couple other things that I'm sure I can add to it. I have like you said, I have a mushroom trip checklist.
What's the domain? Sorry, there's just such a blunt domain to it. What is it?
It's mushroomchecklist.com.
Perfect.
Easy to remember. So whenever you're tripping on mushrooms or really any psychedelic, pull up this PDF. It's completely free. And I dive into what to do before, what to do during the trip to not have that resistance, to be able to surrender, and what you can do after to integrate it into your life.
Yeah, I kind of think it's really interesting why people would do this stuff at a party or at a festival or stuff like that. Because for me, one of the key things you talked about was like, you don't want to be in a park where people are going to come to you or anything. Because if you're in a different world and someone comes up to you in a different world, it's highly, I would say, disorientating.
It's dangerous as well. If they're doing it at a party or a festival, maybe a low dose, like just to get a little bit of a, creative spark in there of some sort, or a little bit of visuals. But if you're doing a deep dose, that's the ceremony to me, And also for me, I respect these plant medicines so much. I would not really dream of doing them in any environment that's not conducive to that deep work that you're coming in to do there.
That's the interesting one for me. Like you've said, respect, sacred. Like this for me is a really personal thing.
Yeah.
And it's a really like, yeah, it's a really sacred, personal thing, which you want to treat like that. And so when you talked about pre-care, you talked about like create a safe space. When I kind of talked about it, I was like, it was candlelit, it was intimate, it was undistracting, like taking down pictures, obviously not having a TV on, being really conscious if you are listening to music that there's no vocals in it that are going to almost like distract you.
Yeah.
Making sure like your phone is miles away from you, making sure there's nobody's going to be knocking on the door or anything, that this is you time and this is like your opportunity to connect in with yourself. That, yeah, the last thing you want is somebody distracting you from that. The kind of the second question I had, and it was quite interesting, was around the kind of the respect, because what I found was this mission came up in me, and it was like, Jamie, we, really charging you to live more in tune to yourself, and so how about you do this and this and this? What I found was that I followed that journey, but once or twice I didn't. And I went back into a psychedelic journey, and it was like, why are you here? And none of the magic was there.
Right.
That's what I found.
You got a lecture.
Yeah. I literally got Jamie, you came here. This was sacred. This was respectful. We told you what you needed to do. You haven't done it. What are you doing back here?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, you shouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. And so this isn't going to be really enjoyable. and it wasn't. It was like there was none of the blissful imagination. There was none of the orgasmic feelings. And the wisdom. I did get access to my memories, and I did get kind of a this is why we told you to do this, and this is why you should go do it. But it kind of felt almost a little bit awkward.
It's like repeating a class that you failed in school, right? It's like, it's a little bit awkward. You're there for a second semester, and you shouldn't really be there if you did your work the first time.
That blew my mind, though, because like the first
intelligence of it.
Yeah, because the first time was all like, wow, wonderful and amazing. And then I went to my mission, and it was like, right, you're back. We're going to do this. And, but coming into that realm, and it'd been awkward and being like, what are you doing here? Mm-hmm. You've work to do. That was very, very interesting for me. That was like, oh, this isn't straightforward. There's an intellect here. They say a psychedelic journey will give you what you need.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting to get a kick in the ass. And I wanted to check in with you and be like, hey, is that normal, or what are your kind of thoughts on that?
So I've had both of these experiences where it's kind of an interesting paradox, where on the one hand, I've had what you describe, where if you go back too soon, you're just going to get a bit of a lecture, a bit of a cosmic slap. And when I did ayahuasca for the very first time, and I had a really transformative journey, and 2 weeks later, there was this other shaman that was coming to Mexico, which is where I was at the time. And my friend, who I did the first ceremony with, he's like, we got to go see this shaman. He's been trained for generations. He's like incredible. And in my mind, I was like, but it's only been 2 weeks. And if I go back right now, I'm probably going to be lectured so much, because I have a year's worth of homework from this first ceremony. And I told him this fear, and he's like, if you go with respect and just as a student, you always have more to learn. So I was more nervous going to the second ceremony 2 or 3 weeks later than that first ceremony, because I was like, oh my God, like I might be energetically kicked out of this ceremony for coming back so soon. But within the first 30 minutes, as we drank the aya and it kicked in, I felt welcome back. I was like, welcome back to the school. And I realized, okay, so if I come back with a lot of respect and intention and understanding that, yes, I did it 2 weeks ago and I'm coming back, but not for fun or anything like that, but purely to learn. And it opened up this whole other level of lessons, completely different from the first ceremony. Mm. So this was also a different shaman, slightly different mixture of the ayahuasca, because each one is so unique. And so I realized in that moment, okay, actually, you can come back and be welcomed into this space, even if you still have integration to do from the first one. But you should not abuse that privilege. Yeah. And that was a very specific situation where it was a different shaman. We really wanted to go see how he operates. And so I think I was granted permission to do that energetically. Okay, so to somebody who hasn't experienced this realm, when they're hearing it, it's like, granted permission, what? Because I think we as humans, we almost have this power, this real idea of power that, like, for whatever we do, it serves us. Like, if we have food, it serves us. If we go into a hotel room, people serve us. It's so interesting to be like, wait a second, respect, teacher, like I in something that you consume, in something that you can grow or something. So I can imagine almost what you're sharing triggers quite a bit up in people. How would you kind of meet that? I would meet it by saying that it's an intelligence. It's a spirit, the spirit of mushrooms, the spirit of ayahuasca, the spirit of San Pedro. These are all very different frequencies and different intelligences that are there to help and guide us. And the substance is more of a permission slip to experience the intelligence so that it makes sense in the 3D story. Because if we could just click our fingers and experience it, that would be pretty intense and terrifying for many people. So it's like we have this story of like, take this mushroom and you will start to experience this thing. But I see it as a permission slip. It's a conduit to then open up to this intelligence. So you're interacting with this intelligence, and it has also decisions that it can make of how much to teach you, how much to show you, how gentle to be with you in the trip, or how intense to be in the trip. And that's why I said the intention matters so much, because it's really your only way of communicating with this intelligence and saying, hey, I'm here to learn. This is what I would like. I'm open to something else as well, because that's the surrender piece. But here is what I ideally would like to receive from this. And then that intelligence can dance with you and can treat you like a partner rather than something that you're using it for experience.
Yeah.
Is that too woo?
No, it's not. There's a beautiful philosophy in it. My sister was was a real door opener for me at an early age to just think differently. And she really kind of adventured into all different areas of wellness, and that catapulted me on my way. And I remember she went off to LA and she went to a conscious eating retreat. And I thought it was quite interesting. One of the kind of lines she came back from that she shared with me was, she said, Jamie, one of the real principles of this program was that how we eat is a reflection of our self-love and respect. And I think that's quite true in terms of, like, if you eat bad foods, generally speaking, they taste great in the short term and they don't really serve you in the long term. A lot of the good foods, they might not be as exciting in the short term, but they really stand to you in the long term. And I take that kind of principle and roll that out across so much in life. And I find that the psychedelic experiences that I have, there's this shared level of, let's say, respect, that they really meet me where I'm at. If I'm respecting myself in terms of how I eat, in terms of my self-care, in terms of my training, in terms of actually just my relationships, am I speaking my truths, or am I kind of people-pleasing? In terms of my work, similarly speaking, is it aligned and true to myself, or am I kind of showing up in a compromised fashion because I want to work with certain people and have certain work? So if I am being true to myself, the reflection in the journey is that I'm taken much deeper, and the journey complements me much more. Whereas when I'm out of sorts, and the fact is we're fluid beings, sometimes I look at myself and I'm like, wow, Jay, amazing. Other times I'm disgraceful. And I actually love that, because I recognize in our world there's such false perfectionism and professionalism put out there. And the fact is, just that's not how we are as a species. We're always up and down and chopping and changing and stuff. But I'm amazed at how, when I've been out of sorts, I've lost touch with my meditation practice, my yoga practice, my eating is a bit out of sorts. I've been, just for whatever reason, stressed and not really showing up in life how I would like. The experiences in those moments when I've dipped into psychedelic realms have been so unbelievably different. So when I am really grounded and caring for myself and loving for myself, there's no like blurriness in those journeys. It is literally like, Jamie, you're back in the chair, you're sitting around the table with your guides. Yeah. You're having interactive conversations where you can really pull knowledge and that vision to my memory. It's all there. And I can like switch the pleasure on if I want, and switch the imagination on and everything. It's amazing. On the other side, when I'm out of sorts, there's sometimes purging, where I find like literally I'm vomiting, and the image I'm having is like, Jamie, you have been eating crap and this is you getting it out of your system. Stop eating it. Or like my body is, I feel all these knots in my body when perhaps I'm not training as well as I should, or sensitively as I should. And my body starts aching. Or if I'm not honoring myself in relationships, I'm seeing how that's hurting me at a soul level, and it's emotionally tough and it's difficult. And that has been so interesting, because I remember expressing that to somebody and they went, oh, you had a bad trip. And I was like, oh no, that was the best kick in the ass I've ever had. That was the strong conversation I had been craving from my family or my friends or loved ones. And I'm amazed at that in terms of how it meets you where you're at. Or certainly for me, it has met me where I'm at, and it has been just so different in so many different ways. But that contrast is just so obviously clear for me.
For me as well. I see psychedelics as truth tellers. So when you're already living in your truth, and like you said, you're aligned, you feel like everything is going properly in your mind, in your body, in your physical health, in your external environment. When you go on a psychedelic trip, because you're already aligned, it doesn't have to do so much work to then bring you into alignment. So the trip can be quite smooth and can go deeper. When you're out of alignment, you're not living your truth. You've been slacking off on what you should be doing. It's almost like there is this blocked energy or this knot, and you go into a psychedelic trip and the mushrooms start unraveling the knots. And that can be uncomfortable and it can be painful and challenging, but they always bring you to that alignment. So for me, at least, I find that by the end of the trip, there is always a moment of catharsis, no matter how difficult the journey is in the beginning or how many knots the mushrooms have had to untangle because of my own distortions. When they're done with me, we are back in alignment. We're back in tune with the highest self. I think if I had to summarize what psychedelics are really doing, I think from my perspective is they're aligning you to your higher self. Your highest, most truest, most authentic self.
And they're clearing out the bullshit.
And they're clearing the cobwebs of the mind.
Nonsense. So, are you ready for the conspiracy conversations?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I really believe that like the illegalization of psychedelics and everything like that. So first things first, I believe as a life coach, I would be out of a job if people knew how to use psychedelics and were using them more.
Intentionally.
Yeah, I would be just like, what's the need for a coach? And I always say this to anybody that's working with me. It's like, my belief is that no one can be a better coach to themselves than themselves. They just need to know how to connect in with themselves. And this is like, here's the front door, here's the bell, just ring it and you're front and center. It's incredible in that regard. But what I'm amazed about in so many of the lessons is that it pulls me away from what I want to say is like societal bullshit. And I'm being honest, being like a bit of a victim of marketing, our behavioral norms, and I'm being trapped, really. Like I find with it, like, let's say a psychedelic perspective, I can very clearly see the foods that serve me and the ones that don't. I can very clearly see like how literally I can be hijacked by brands and how I can be true to myself. I can very quickly find how I can be hijacked actually by others. There's a great saying in the entrepreneurial world, like if you don't work on your dreams, you'll find yourself working for others. And like with my perspective, I'm like, oh my God, that's like the 99%. Most people are running around serving everybody else but themselves. And
if you don't have a plan, you're part of someone else's plan.
Yeah. And so what I've been kind of amazed about is it really helps me serve myself and clear out the agendas of others and the agendas, generally speaking, of like big companies. And that's a really like, with that knowledge, that perspective, I kind of stand back and I'm like, oh, wait a second. This is really, really, really suspect in terms of an legalization.
Yeah. So what mushrooms are doing there is they're dehypnotizing you from external influences. Yeah. And when we come back to the 3D, and I don't know how much of it is malicious and how much of it is incompetence, but there is a lot of hypnotizing going on. Even just like your own mom could phone you up, and in a way, what she's saying to you, although of her fear of something or her doubts of something, that's also hypnotizing you in a certain way. So what mushrooms do is they just bring you right back to your core. What does your gut say about this? What does your heart say? And that's why you can make such amazing decisions right after a mushroom trip, because you're fully in alignment with your inner voice, not the voices of your parents, your colleagues, your friends, who are all maybe well-meaning, but they don't have access to your guidance system.
I have an image, sorry, that's coming up. You know, when someone's speaking, I'm remembering going for a beer after my first trip and like having this moment. It was a sunny day and I was like, oh, Lovely. A beer, sunny day, nice view. And I took a sip and I just spat it straight out.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, this tastes like shit. That was amazing. That was the biggest level of clarity of like, wow, marketing hasn't just hacked my mind, it's hacked my tastes.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was amazed at how clearly I could recognize how just it didn't taste nice. And that yeah, I love the way you said that. Like, yeah, we are subtly and sometimes being quite abruptly hypnotized by in my case, my example, brands, but in other cases, like, yeah, people projecting their fears onto you, people projecting their ideas onto you. It can be very, very, very hard to think for yourself.
And I think that's where the more widespread use of psychedelics intentionally for personal growth can be absolutely life-changing for the individual, but also for the whole world. Because when all of us are living from this place of truth, you can't bullshit me anymore.
Yeah.
I just see too much. And this is not coming from an ego perspective. It's like when I look into someone's eyes, I can see their soul. I can see if they're lying to me. I might not even be able to prove if it's a lie, but I can just tell energetically. And I think we are all born with those capabilities. And then through school education, everyone's sitting in their grid of rows and being forced to be hypnotized by the teacher, you lose access to your own innate knowledge. And then, fortunately, there's these little shrooms planted on 6 of the 7 continents, which bring you back into alignment. It's almost like God or the universe or source planted these little hacks in the simulation so that no matter how hypnotized or misled you've been, you will have the chance to come back to source. And for some people, it's through psychedelics. For others, it's through breath work. For others, it's through meditation. But there's all these tools that get put in your way on your path, clues that if you pay attention, you will pick them up. You will be called to some of them in your own way, in your own time. And I think it was Rumi that said, we're all walking each other home. So everyone is going home to source. Everyone is coming back to the truth. It's been amazing to watch the last 20 years of how much more widespread things like manifestation, intention, energetics, astrology, psychedelics, all these things which maybe were more considered woo are just becoming more and more mainstream, and the new generations have no problem using these tools.
Yeah. I always think it's a case of like language. Like sometimes people overcomplicate things, or like put a little bit too mystique around it so you don't understand. And I think when we don't understand something, we fear it. But in actual fact, when things are simplified, or when you just take the time to understand something, they become a hell of a lot more straightforward. And I like that. Like if somebody was like, hey, look, what do psychedelics do? It's like, generally speaking, they help you just filter out your own bullshit and bring you back home.
Truth tellers.
Yeah, truth tellers. Lovely. Really, really lovely. I liked also as well that you kind of gave different examples, because to be honest, like one thing that I've massively recognized is that we're very individual beings, and what works for some people might not necessarily work for others. So like in my experience, psychedelics have been fantastic. In your experience, they have. In my network of entrepreneurs, in your network of entrepreneurs, fantastic. For others, they might not agree, but what you shared, like breath work, everybody's on such a massive breathwork buzz, and that might work for them, or yoga might work for them. Or actually, sometimes the funniest one of the lot is just stillness. Can be the great tool, but it's what I kind of find frustrating is like this one, which has been so unbelievably helpful and supportive to me, is met with such fear, and it's like doesn't need to be there. In actual fact, it's in the right way, in the right fashion, it can be extraordinarily positive.
You mentioned stillness, and I kind of laugh because actually I've had this realization. I feel like half of the benefit of psychedelics is that you're sitting still for 6 hours alone in a room with yourself. So even without the psychedelics, just the ability to reflect on your life and your path in life for 6 hours or 8 hours in the dark alone it's already given you so much. And then on top of that, the psychedelics come in and start moving the furniture around in your mind.
You know, I've been on so many retreats, workshops. I've worked with so many different coaches, therapists, and yeah, what you've shared there, like so much revolves around just sit in stillness and let your body catch up, let your body repair, let your mind catch up with itself. The other one as well was sleep, that they were like, you want the biggest hack. I remember I almost found it kind of comical. Like I went to all these different health and wellness and then all these kind of sexy retreats, and they all came down to like the biggest improvement, sleep better.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing I find fascinating about like the holistic world and of therapies, that like, you know, most of the solutions you're getting, it's not a jar or it's not some product or something like that. It's just like, if you could sleep a little bit better, this is going to change all these areas of your life. Or if you could just slow down a little bit and find a little bit of time to be still, your anxiety will decrease, your depression will go. Like and actually that's just me speaking from my experience. I'm amazed at how so many of my issues were, in reflection now, I clearly see were self-induced. And the cures to them were not the complicated things that I initially imagined up. But in actual fact, they were as simple as just sleep a little bit better, go a little bit slower, find some time for stillness. And yeah, like certainly it is a funny one when you think that like a psychedelic journey is generally about 6 hours of just sitting with yourself. There's a huge benefit in that alone.
It's a forced meditation. Yeah. So if someone doesn't meditate, they're going to be meditating in the mushroom trip.
Well, I remember I talked to a meditator who said like, look, this is what I get. And I was looking at them in their elderly age. And I was like, how long have you been meditating? They were about 25, 30 years.
Wow.
And they were like, look, everything you're sharing is what I experience. And I was like, oh, that sounds fantastic. And there was just this kind of like, perhaps he was disrespecting my like, well, I just got this from some mushrooms. And I was like, oh God, I'm not too sure if I could do 25 years of discipline to get to there. So that was an interesting one, being like, hey, look, you don't actually need the mushrooms. You can develop these skills yourself. It would just take a hell of a lot of discipline. Mm-hmm. And that's actually something I'm not too sure how I feel. Like I love the fact that it can be taken self-induced, but then there's the like, it's kind of nice to skip the queue a little bit. What do you think?
All roads lead to Rome. I see it as a beautiful harmony of the universe, that here's this discipline that you can, for those that are ready to do it for 20, 30 years, it will lead them there. And then here's another tool that will lead you there, like mushrooms. And then here's another tool like DMT or Bufo, which will lead you there in 5 seconds. So there's these levels of how deep and how fast you can go. And so if someone's taking Bufo, they will reach Godhead, center of the universe, within 5 to 10 seconds. That's insane. And it's insane that it's available to us. And we're so blessed and privileged to have these sort of tools. And that's why the respect is essential, because, you know, when you said some people have fears around psychedelics, a lot of them are unfounded, but some maybe are founded. If someone's not ready to face their mind,
yeah,
then they should not do psychedelics. If someone's not ready to face their shadow, they shouldn't do it, or they should start with a very low dose and with a trip sitter and with a facilitator. Because this is deep work. This is serious work.
Yeah, I really like what you shared initially speaking, that you were like, look, if you're prepping for your first trip, do less rather than more.
Do less.
And
you have a lifetime full of trips. You don't need to get the 5 grams, 7 grams heroic dose right away. And please don't.
I love your all roads lead to Rome, in that, like, to be fair, exactly. Going back a little bit, where I was like, look, there's different tools for different types. And for that person who sat in his practice for 25 years, that's actually like, there's huge pride and that's his path.
But there shouldn't be any snobbery around from either side.
And also psychedelics might just not have been for him. And that's yeah, it's interesting how we all have our own unique lives with our own unique journeys. And actually, it's not about me, like, not like, you know, not thinking ill of anyone else's. It's actually just the openness and the curiosity and the nice to share the experience, and him to be like, wow, I've actually found this from here. Ooh, interesting. I found this from here. Have you been able to do this? And we can actually learn more about each other's practices through a level of openness as well. So thank you. I actually just got that little bit of clarity from what you shared. So thank you so much. James, can I ask, if somebody wanted to connect with you, and like, I love the way you've got the websites again. Could you give me those 2 domains?
So mushroomchecklist.com is going to give you the free PDF of what to do before, during, and after your trip. And for those that want sacred, shroomy music that I've personally shroom tested on all my trips, you can go to mushroomplaylist.com, and that'll give you there's 7 levels so far, and each time I'm doing a new trip, I add a new level. So the next one's going to be level 8 and so on.
Sorry, it's a lovely thing, do you want me asking, when somebody builds a business around what they love, and gets giddy sharing their work. So like, obviously this isn't on video, but as I'm looking at James, and you could hear it in his tone and everything, he's smiling. He's like, oh, I love this. And it's level 3 and then level 4. And there's one thing that I really believe is we sometimes we question whether there's a career in doing what we love and following our heart. You've built a career in doing what you love, right? I think that is really inspiring. This whole space as well, likewise, is really, really inspiring. But it was just actually so nice to kind of just touch into that. Or you certainly brought it up in me that like, we can get excited about sharing our work. Sometimes people think like, oh, it's sleazy or it's salesy. And it's like, no, it can be really helpful and it can be really enjoyable. Our work can be fun. And thank you for that reminder as well, because I think it's really important. For me, I notice I have a brain that sometimes likes to overcomplicate and sometimes likes to think that work should be hard. And I really need reminders. And you just gave me a really good one there, that it's like, no, Jamie, your work can be fun. And yeah, you might put a price tag on it, but it can be really enjoyable. And you can enjoy, not just producing it, but sharing it likewise. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the amazing conversation. When you said about excitement, it reminds me of Bashar's formula for success. So Bashar has this formula, and it goes something like, follow your highest excitement in every moment to the best of your ability, taking it as far as you can take it, and then follow the next thread of excitement. And that's what Bashar is saying, is there's that source is guiding you. Your higher self is giving you these clues through your body's excitement, through your mental excitement of this is something you should follow. And I think that's something that everyone can use with their career, with their path in life, is you're being led by source. You're being led by source. When I started doing psychedelics, I had no idea that I would be having a YouTube channel about it or having playlists about it that I'm sharing with people, teaching people about how to do intentional trips. I had no idea. But Source was patiently guiding me step by step, person by person, teacher by teacher, mentor by mentor, to my ultimate destiny.
It's lovely. I actually think it's a nice, like, almost parting meditation for someone to take their hand, place it over their heart, and just ask themselves, like, what would bring me more excitement in my life right now? What things could I do today that would set me up for more fun, more joy, more lightness, more ease?
Yes.
And if you were to kind of close your eyes and sit into those questions, it'd be interesting to see what answers would come up. And if you were to follow them, what steps they might lead you towards. It's an ever-ending journey that's all, ultimately speaking, leading us home. And some paths are more fun than others. So, James, thank you so much. If someone wants to connect with you, best place is probably Instagram, is it?
I would say best place is my newsletter, jamesxander.com.
Okay.
Because that'll give them direct access to me. And then also my YouTube channel. If they type in James Xander, they'll find all my videos.
And that's Xander, like James, James, and then Xander, Xander.
Yes.
I feel it's sorry, this is me probably thinking too much about the X-Men, but when I put an X, it feels very powerful and very strong and confident. So thank you. Thank you for the chats. Thank you for helping me explore into this space and for sharing. This is really cool. This is the podcast I wish I got to listen to 10 years ago. Oh. And so thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I loved this conversation. I loved your questions, your curiosity, and just the way you lead the discussion is fantastic. Thank you, brother.
Lovely.
You've been listening to the James Xander Trip podcast. Thank you so much to Jamie White for inviting me as a guest on his podcast, The University of Life. Go check out his podcast. It's fantastic. I deeply enjoyed this conversation. For more shroomy episodes like this, be sure to subscribe to the James Xander Trip on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. And please leave me a rating if you enjoyed this podcast. Have a beautiful, blessed day, and I'll see you in the next episode.